Hey, how's it going? Today I wanted to do a class tier list video, just talk about the classes, what I think about them, which ones are my favourite, which ones I don't like as much. So today I'm going to be basing this mainly off power, flavour and fun, as I think it's the best way to judge classes in D&D. If you disagree with me, I'm sorry. This is all subjective. If I put your class low down on the list, let me know why I'm wrong. But yeah, let's jump into this. Barbarian. Barbarian for me is an A tier. I think the tankiness of the class is really fun. I really love Rage as a mechanic. I think Barbarian has so many fun mechanics. I think Rage is one of the best ones. I think Reckless Attack is amazing too. I really like Unarmored Defense as well. I think they all work in such a great way to make the flavour of the class really fun. I also really like Barbarian subclasses, like Berserkers, Totem Warriors, Wild Magic. I think they're really fun and give such a good sense of variety to the class. I think without these subclasses being so specific, I think it would be really simple to run the same type of character over and over and over. So I think the subclasses, especially Wild Magic, give a great sense of variety to each Barbarian. The reasons why I think it's not S is because they are simple to play. I think this is a good thing, but I think it's also a bad thing for a lot of veteran D&D players because of it can be a little bit repetitive in combat. And out of combat, Barbarians don't have much abilities. They do have the intimidation, but I find that they lack other means to interact with the world except for combat, which obviously makes sense for the class. I think some people can find that a bit boring to play and want to have a more social character. So I think they're A in terms of I enjoy them, but I think Barbarian is a very contentious class. Bard, which is pretty much the opposite. They go into B tier for me. I think Bards are the best class at our combat. I think they're so fun in social scenarios. I think Jack of all trades is such a fun ability. I also love that they get expertise, meaning that you can go for a very social character who avoids combat and tries to impress people. I find that classes that use a lot of skill checks really fun because it means that I'm constantly engaged and trying to figure out a way to use them. And I think that adds so much more in the game because it means you're active in every instance, not just in combat. I think Bards also have really fun spells like Vicious Mockery, which is very famously associated with Bards, is such a fun spell. And I think Bards have a lot of spells like these, like Pyrotechnics. It's really fun as well, just to add that kind of flavour and uniqueness to the class and separate them from all the others. My problem though, and the reason why they're at B, is that I feel like their subclasses are a bit bland. They have the College of Swords, College of Law, College of Whispers, and off the top of my head, I don't think I would be able to pick out what each subclass does. I don't find them very unique or very specific, as I do with a lot of the other subclasses. For example, Barbarian, Wild Magic Barbarian, I know exactly what it does. This isn't to say that these subclasses are weak, I just feel like they lack a bit of flavour. And I also think that Bards can get a little bit bland after level 5 because they don't get much more abilities after that. They kind of are just improving the abilities that they already had. And I can find that a little bit boring. So that's why they're at B, but I do really have a good time playing Bards. Cleric. Cleric is a surprise S tier for me. I wasn't expecting to put this as S tier, but when I was going through them, it's just so hard to not put Clerics at the top. They have an insane amount of subclasses, 14 to be specific. Divine Intervention is one of my favourite abilities in the game. Just being able to call upon God for help is so fun. And speaking of that, I think Clerics make for really good storylines. I think some classes have really good built-in flavour. I think Cleric is one of them because you are interacting with your god a lot, and it means that if you want to do a god switch, it's amazing for stories. For example, spoilers for Baldur's Gate. When Shadowheart switches from Shah to Saloon, it's really fun and it makes such a simple and interesting story. And I think that can happen a lot with Clerics, and that isn't a downside. I think it's a really fun story beat to do. And if someone has a hard time with their god, if they stick with them, I think that's really interesting as well. I think Cleric has such good flavour based abilities. I think a lot of people think of Clerics as healers and just healers. I think they are so much more than just healers. For example, the War subclass, which allows your god delivers a bolt of inspiration to you whilst you're engaged in combat. When you use an attack action, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. They are so good at dishing out damage as well, and they're so versatile due to their amount of subclasses that I think they kind of have to be in S tier because they are just so powerful. Druid is next. I personally am not a huge fan of Druids, which is why they go into C tier. I think their world shape ability is really fun, especially their subclass Circle of the Moon, which helps enhance that. I think they've also got really fun spells like Shillelagh. I don't know why, I'm a big fan of Shillelagh. It's quite iconic to the Druid class, and I've always liked it as a cantrip. But I think my problem with Druids is I find their flavour really lacking. In most campaigns I've ever played with a Druid, they are this very serious protector of the forest, because I think the class pushes you in that direction. I find that a little bit boring. And maybe this is not specifically the class's fault, but I feel like a lot of classes push you into certain directions with their subclasses or abilities. For example, Warlock is the best class in terms of flavour, and I think Druid is lacking in that. It's so hard to break away from the traditional Druid archetype, so I think a lot of players play into that. Fighter is a staple in D&D. It's seen as the best starting class, which I 100% agree with. It's also the most popular class in D&D. If you don't know, human fighter is the most common race and class combination, which is quite funny. But I would put them in B tier personally. Their pros are they're fantastic for new players, as I've mentioned. They do really, really good damage. And personally, I love fighting styles. That's the same for Ranger as well. I think they add so much uniqueness to combat for your specific fighter. I think that's really, really fun. My problem with Fighter is that they are just a bit too simple. Like Action Surge is really fun, Second Wind is really fun, and the extra attacks you get later on are amazing. I feel like generally in a fighter's turn, you swing to hit, you deal damage, and you move on to the next person. And I think in a longer campaign, if you're playing for a year or more, that can get a little boring. I understand there is Eldritch Knight, which is a really fun subclass, and Battlemaster, which is really fun, and they do add extra to your turns. But for me, they don't add necessarily enough to make each turn feel special, like you can do with some other classes and some of the other higher ranking classes, in my opinion, on this list. Monk is my least favourite class in D&D. I'm sorry to all the monk lovers. I think key points are a really fun idea. I think they can work out really nicely with the Flurry of Blows and the Stunning Strikes. I think that's really fun. But they just have so many stupid abilities, like Purity of Body, which stops you being able to get poisoned, and that's 10th level, I believe, and Timeless Body, again, which is 14th level. And I think these abilities are just so mundane and don't add anything, and especially that they're so close together, like 10th level and 14th level aren't that far apart in terms of later game abilities, so you aren't adding that much. And I think their subclasses are really boring as well. I think the only highlight subclass for me is Drunken Master, or Way of the Drunken Master, which I think is really fun, but it's quite weak. Also, I think their flavour kind of sucks, so personally, Monk is quite low for me. Paladin, which is an S tier for me, and personally my favourite class. Paladins are so just overall good. They have such great healing abilities, such great damage abilities, especially with smites. I think the smites add so much to combat, where you always have that choice of, am I going to push for a smite? Am I going to hold my spell slot? Or are we going to try and end combat early? I think that's really fun and gives you a lot of choices every single turn. I think their subclasses are really fun. Personally, Paladin has my favourite subclass in the game, which is Oath of Vengeance. I love the flavour, I love the story. For me, every Paladin I've ever ran started out as another Oath and then ended up as an Oath of Vengeance, just because the title of it is really cool. I think the abilities are really fun as well. I think Paladins have really fun flavour. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. I think a lot of people see Paladins as stern or goody two-shoes, but I think their relationship with their god and their relationship with their oath is really interesting. It's kind of like a pact for Warlock, and I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but if you have a kind of strict oath and you have to play into that, I think that's really fun and can add to a lot of really, really tough character-based choices. Like if your god tier wants you to fulfill out justice, but you disagree with the justice ruling he's given, and he wants you to hurt someone on his behalf for that, what do you do? And I think these character choices really add so much to the game, and which is why I like when certain classes kind of push you in flavor directions, because if you break your oath, you lose it. And I love that. I think that's amazing. So big fan of Paladins, in my opinion. Next up is Ranger. Ranger hurts me, if I'm being honest. I really, really like Rangers. I think they're really fun. My favorite character I've played, which is called Hangwaiters, which is the name of the channel, is a Ranger, and I love him. But the problem is I would be so hypocritical if I didn't put them low down on the list, because of some of their abilities are just awful. So for me, they're going in high C tier, which is really painful for me. The reason why is I really like fighting styles, as I mentioned earlier. I think Rangers has my favorite fighting style and I think Fighter has it as well, with archery, which gives you a +2 to attack, which means genuinely in the early game, Rangers are really, really good. They have such high hits. For example, my Ranger at level 5 was able to get +9 to hit, which felt really good and really powerful because of that consistency. And I think a lot of people overlook that when they're talking about making characters, because yes, your character may be able to do a lot of damage, but how often are they able to hit? Which I think is a very important aspect. I also think Rangers do have a couple of really fun subclasses, like Gloomstalker and Horizon Walker. Yes, they were both added in Xanathar and they're not in the base game, but I think they're really, really fun subclasses. But the problems with Rangers are the player handbook subclasses for them are so bad, and I feel like they aren't given much flavor to work with, which I was talking about with other classes. And they have some really, really bad abilities, like Hide in Plain Sight, which I would argue is the worst ability in the game, because you have to prep for 10 minutes to add 10 to your AC, but you can't move. You have to be completely still in that time. If you're able to ever get this off in campaign, I commend you. I believe that's a level 7 or level 10 ability, I can't remember. And then they have the Vanish ability as well, which is at 14th level, which means you can use Hide as your bonus action, and you can't be tracked by non-magical means, and which is what rogues get really early on. But additionally, they get to use Disengage as a bonus action, Dash as a bonus action, and I believe Dodge as a bonus action as well, and Hide. If you're getting that 14th level as a Ranger, feels really bad. So Ranger has to be low on this list. Next up, we have Rogues. I'm a big fan of Rogues. I know a lot of people say they are kind of boring and have that edginess to them. I think that's true, but I think Rogues are so versatile, which is why they go into A tier for me. Sneak Attack is such a fun ability. It always gives you incentive in combat to be like, how am I going to get advantage on this attack? How am I going to activate my Sneak Attack? Which I think is really, really fun. I think they've got great out of combat abilities as well, with their Thieves tools, with their expertise, which makes them really fun. And I think their subclasses really push them in a lot of directions, with the Mastermind, with the Assassin. For me, if I want to play a character and I'm not sure what class they're going to be, they will probably end up being a rogue for me. For example, I had a character called Throdin, which was a dwarf archaeologist. I had no idea what class I was going to make him, so I made him a rogue, even though he was a pacifist and he wasn't like necessarily out to hurt people. The stealth abilities and the number of subclasses, I believe I chose Mastermind for him, allowed me to be able to make any type of character work for a rogue, which I think is really, really fun as well. And I really love their Arcane Trickster subclass as well. I think that's really fun, making Mage Hand invisible. I love rogues. I think they're really fun. I love Uncanny Dodge. I love Expertise. I think they're amazing. The reason why they're not necessarily up in S tier is because I do find that if you aren't able to hit your Sneak Attack, that does kind of suck. With Rogue, there is that kind of push to be a edgier character, and maybe that's the stigmatism around Rogue, and that's why it's not necessarily S for me, and I'm sorry about that. But I do think Rogue is kind of pushed into this corner where you have to be sneaky and you have to be a little bit edgy, which kind of I'm not a huge fan of. So that's why it's A tier for me. Sorcerer. Sorcerer is an S tier. I am a big fan of Sorcerers. They are the class I used for my first run in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm personally not a big fan of spellcasters. They're not really my favourite type of class. I don't like looking at spells just because they're so specific and you need to mention everything to your DM. But Sorcerers are my exception to this because I think the sorcery point system and meta magic is so fun. Twin Spelled is amazing. Subtle Spell makes for some amazing, huge moments. I love their subclasses, especially the Storm-based subclass and the Wild Magic, which I think Wild Magic is known as kind of the funnest subclass. I understand that Wild Magic isn't necessarily strong, but I think it's so fun. That's worth playing at least once. But I think that is also made up for with their sorcery points. I think their sorcery points are amazing. I love the amount of spells they get. I love that they can replenish spells. I think they're amazing. The only con for them for me is their low HP, but they're a spellcaster, they're ranged. It kind of makes sense. I think they have to have a low HP, else they're just a bit unbalanced. So yeah, Sorcerer is an S tier for me. Warlock is up next. They are the hardest one to pin down for me personally. I love their invocations. I love how every single Warlock you play is completely unique. I love their packs. I love the flavor on having this being that is so much more powerful you in charge of you is so fun. They have the best flavor in the game, but my problem with them is Eldritch Blast is so pushed for in Warlock, and I think there is that common meme that Warlocks only use Eldritch Blast, and that is because of their lack of spell slots, which I also am not a huge fan of. I believe up until level 10 they only have 2 spell slots, which sucks. I understand they can replenish them at a short rest, but depending on the campaign, you're not going to be short resting that often. I'm going to put Warlocks in B tier because I do think their flavor carries them a lot. I'm going to put them at top of B tier because I think their flavor carries them a lot, but personally, the reliance on Eldritch Blast and their lack of spell slots make them a bit frustrating for me to play. But I love their subclasses. I love their packs. I think they're really fun. So they are staying at B tier for me. Wizard is up next. Wizard is a class that I remember when I first started playing D&D completely overwhelmed me and made me think, is this the game for me? They are in A tier for me, probably bottom of A tier. I love the amount of spells they get. I think they're really fun. They are iconic to the game, especially with the Fireball. Their subclasses are really fun, even though there's a lot of them, especially Divination. Divination is a great subclass with the Portents. It's so unique. I love it. I think it's really fun. Basically, any wizard you play is going to be a bit unique because of their subclass. I think that's amazing as well. The reason why they're in A tier is because I find them a little bit complex, especially for new players. I think because you have so many spells and so many spells to prepare, and you have to choose each day which ones you're going to use, I find that a little bit overwhelming sometimes. But I think they're really fun. And I think if you haven't played Wizard before, you 100% should. You just got to make sure that your character sheet easily lists your spells for you, else you're just going to have a horrible time. So this is my final ranking for my tier list. I think it's good. If you disagree with me, please let me know. I'm sorry if your favorite class is Monk. I wanted to talk about Artificers and Blood Hunters, but they weren't on this tier list and the other ones had bad icons. So I think I'm going to do another tier list talking about those classes specifically. But yeah, if there's any other video or tier list or anything you want me to make, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all of you. So see ya and enjoy the rest of your day.